He turned down Led Zeppelin, dodged Deep Purple, and left the music world asking the same question for 5 decades straight. Was Terry Reid a fearless visionary or the most sabotaged voice in rock history? From the outside, he had it all. A voice so powerful, it got him nicknamed Superlungs before he could legally order a pint. The swagger of a frontman, the look of a star, and that rare kind of magic, raw, unruly talent that didn't fit into any box. He wasn't just good, he was disruptive. And in the music biz, that's not always a compliment. At just 16 years old, Terry Reid was already touring with the Rolling Stones. Picture it, a teenage kid barely out of school, commanding arenas and keeping up with literal legends. Fans were stunned by his vocals, which swung between raspy soul and pure rock grit with zero effort. But industry insiders, they weren't just impressed, they were circling. And that's when the first domino fell. Jimmy Page wanted Reid to front Led Zeppelin. Yes, that Led Zeppelin. The offer was major, a golden ticket, the type of gig that turns good singers into gods. But Terry didn't bite. He had already committed to opening for the Stones on a US tour and didn't want to break his word. Honor over hype, loyalty over legacy. At least, that's one version of the story. Some say he was never that into Zeppelin's sound to begin with. Others claim he didn't want to be managed, that he wasn't down to be a puppet, even if it meant trading the spotlight for solitude. Either way, it was a move that shook the entire industry. But hold up, because it didn't end there. Soon after, Deep Purple came knocking. Another heavyweight band, another chance at global stardom. And again, he passed. The music world was confused. His fans were divided, and some were furious. Quietly, word started spreading that Terry was difficult, unreliable, a guy who thought he was too good for the system. And that's when the narrative began to shift. He wasn't a rising star anymore. He was a rebel, an outsider. The press pivoted from praising his talent to questioning his judgment. Labels got cautious. Buzz faded. And in an industry that thrives on compliance and clickbait, Terry Reid had committed the ultimate sin. He said no. Twice. But here's the twist. Instead of crawling back to the machine, he doubled down. He went solo. He poured his soul into albums like River and Seed of Memory, projects that critics loved but record stores didn't know how to sell. The production was ahead of its time. The lyrics, cosmic, emotional, and totally unfiltered. It was pure art. But with no marketing muscle behind it, it never charted. And behind the scenes, the whispers got louder. Was he being blackballed? Sabotaged? Or did he want to stay in the shadows? Because from here on out, nothing about his career went the way it was supposed to. And this is where it starts getting messy. Terry didn't disappear. He just slipped into the shadows. Like a ghost the industry couldn't shake, but refused to spotlight. After turning down Zeppelin and Deep Purple, he didn't chase a third shot at fame. He walked away. But instead of silence, Terry's voice just found new homes in other people's hits. Throughout the 80s, he became the guy behind the guy. His vocals added grit and soul to tracks by Don Henley, Jackson Browne, Bonnie Raitt, a supporting role in everyone else's story. He was the secret sauce, the not-so-secret genius floating around every major studio, but never on the cover. Insiders say he liked it that way. No suits, no brand deals, no compromises. But others? They saw the signs of a man boxed out. Producers whispered that labels considered him unmanageable, that he didn't test well. Some even claim a record executive once called him the best voice we can't sell. And that's when the rumors started swirling. Was Terry Reid blackballed for refusing to play the fame game? Did powerful people decide his voice would stay in the background no matter how legendary? Because by 1991, it looked like he was ready to come roaring back. That year, he released The Driver, an album drenched in sweat, soul, and second chances, produced by Trevor Horn. Yeah, that Trevor Horn. With contributions from Hans Zimmer, and positioned to be the comeback of the decade. There was even a track allegedly written as the theme song for Days of Thunder, starring Tom Cruise. A blockbuster, a chance at redemption. But then, radio silence. A film went with a different sound, and The Driver quietly fizzled. Some say it was timing. Others say it was sabotage. One former publicist, speaking anonymously, claimed, There were politics. Ignanes didn't want him to outshine the newer voices they were investing in. Fans didn't buy the excuses. They called it what it felt like: erasure. You can't blacklist a man this talented unless someone really wants him gone. But wait, it gets deeper, because even as his career faded from the charts, his music refused to die. Years later, artists like Chris Cornell, the Raconteurs, Marianne Faithfull, and even DJ Shadow started resurrecting his sound, sampling it, covering it, honoring it. The industry may have pushed him out, but the artists, they never stopped listening. Still, Terry wasn't basking in the blow. While his legacy quietly bloomed, he stayed out of the spotlight. No viral interviews, no revenge memoir, no TikTok redemption tour. Just whispers of brilliance from those who knew the real story. And just when people started asking where he went, life hit him with something darker than the industry ever could. You're not ready for what came next. Behind the long hair, the psychedelic chords, and that once-in-a-generation voice was a man quietly fighting two battles. One with the industry, and one with his own body. By 2025, Terry Reid's name was echoing again. This time, not on the radio, but in whispered shock online. Fans discovered he had canceled an entire tour and was undergoing treatment for a serious illness. It wasn't just the diagnosis that stunned people. It was what came next. A crowdfunding campaign surfaced. That's right, Terry Superlungs Reid, the man who once turned down Led Zeppelin and gave Robert Plant his big break, was now asking fans to help cover his medical bills. Let that sink in. A voice that shaped rock history had to pass the hat around just to stay alive. Supporters were outraged. Industry vets were embarrassed. And for those who'd followed Terry since the 70s, it felt like the final insult. He wasn't just forgotten. He was failed by the very system he refused to bow to. But even then, he kept performing. Not for money, not for fame, but because music was the one thing cancer couldn't silence. He sang in dive bars, small theaters, acoustic sets with just a guitar and a stool. No flashy lights, no giant screens, just that voice, still gravel smooth and full of fire. Fans who saw him in those final shows described the experience as spiritual, devastating, and unreal, like watching a legend bleed truth into every note. And through it all, no complaints, no dramatic statements, no public dragging of the music execs who ghosted him when the checks stopped coming. He just kept showing up, with a mic in hand and stories in his chords. But here's what stings the most. While Terry was fighting for his life in real time, his name was suddenly everywhere again. In samples, tributes, viral TikToks, and Gen Z vocal masterclass threads. It took a medical emergency for people to remember. And still, Terry kept it graceful. Fans say he responded to supporters personally, that even in pain, he stayed grateful. One concertgoer said, "He looked tired, but when he opened his mouth, it was like the heavens cracked open. His voice never left him." And maybe that's the most poetic part. He was called Superlungs, and even as his body betrayed him, his lungs stayed magic till the end. And when the end finally came, it wasn't met with headlines. It wasn't plastered all over streaming services. There were no primetime tributes or legacy retrospectives. Just a few stunned tweets, some teary Instagram posts from fellow musicians, and a quiet but devastating realization: the world lost a giant without even noticing. But the real gut punch, the ones he helped build, the ones who made millions off the career he never took, remained mostly silent. And that's where the final twist starts to take shape. Some say Terry Reid was a victim of bad timing. Others say he was cursed by his own decisions. But the people who knew him, they whisper a different story entirely. That Terry wasn't unlucky. He was too dangerous to control. He didn't play the game. He didn't chase the spotlight. He didn't fake a smile to stay in a label's good graces. In an era where every big act had to play nice with the machine, Terry Reid refused to be manufactured, and that's what made him unforgettable and unmarketable. One former A&R rep who worked with multiple major artists in the 90s allegedly once said, "Terry didn't care about being famous. That scared people. You can't monetize a man like that." And maybe that's why his name never hit the mainstream the way it should have. He didn't fall from grace. He was pushed out quietly, left to echo through other people's success stories, like a ghost they hoped no one would notice. But they underestimated his voice. Because even after the industry tried to erase him, his fingerprints were everywhere. In Robert Plant's phrasing, in Chris Cornell's grit, in the DNA of every artist who dared to sound soulful and raw instead of clean and commercial. Every time someone belts out a verse with reckless abandon, every time a young singer lets emotion override perfection, they're channeling Terry, whether they know it or not. And when he passed on August 4th, 2025, he didn't get the media frenzy reserved for less deserving icons. There were no tribute concerts, no sudden streaming boosts, just a handful of stunned headlines and a chorus of artists quietly saying what should have been shouted decades ago. Terry Reid was the real deal, and we didn't deserve him. So was Terry Reid a lost legend, or the blueprint the industry couldn't profit from? Did he walk away on his own terms, or did the gatekeepers lock the doors behind him? Maybe that's the final mystery. Maybe that's why, all these years later, the name Terry Reid still makes people pause. Because even if you didn't know him, you felt him. You heard him in the background. You sang along to his influence without realizing it. And maybe that's the most iconic ending of all. No final act, no dramatic comeback. Just a legend who never needed the lights to shine. If this story hit you the way it hit us, make some noise in the comments. Terry Reid didn't get his flowers when he was alive. So let's plant a whole damn garden down below. Hit subscribe for more legends who never got their due, but left their mark anyway. Because here at Icons Never Die, we remember the ones the industry tried to forget.